Good afternoon, and welcome to our first Retail Tomorrow virtual series, Brave New Retail World. I'm Patrick Spear, President and CEO of GMDC Retail Tomorrow, and we're happy you've joined us. We're excited to host you and your colleagues over the next few weeks, where we'll introduce you to the thought leaders, disruptors, and provocative retail concepts that will inform and shape Retail Tomorrow. This series was made possible through the generous support of our Retail Tomorrow annual sponsors, Accelerate, Energizer, Intel, Navajo Inc., and Unilever. When we launched Retail Tomorrow 4 years ago, we did so with a vision to connect the industry to what's next. And since that time, we've hosted numerous city immersions focused on specific retail themes and centered on meeting the innovators that are creating the future in real time. Following visits to the Bay Area, New York, Seattle, Toronto, Los Angeles, and Boston, we've decided to create and curate a virtual experience that will enable you to continue your innovation journey regardless of your current travel restrictions. If you've experienced one of our immersions, you know they're typically action-packed as we're constantly on the move. Rather than rely on PowerPoints and meeting rooms, we seek out the retail concepts, technology solutions, and innovative products for you to see, touch, and hear. We also partner with technology leaders like Google and Microsoft, innovation accelerators like Plug and Play, and universities like MIT and Harvard to bring a broader perspective on the platforms and trends that are enabling massive industry shifts. To date, we've hosted multiple innovation demo days where the Retail Tomorrow community has been introduced to dozens of startups and scale-up companies that are ready to win with retail and CPG organizations. At the conclusion of the Brave New Retail World 4-part series, participants will come away with the following: a heightened understanding of consumer behavior, not just in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, but more importantly, the longer-term behavioral shifts and retail implications. A view of not just the most intriguing retail concepts in the US marketplace, but possible new concepts not yet in our market that will redefine retail relevance in a post-COVID world. Specific insights regarding post-COVID retail implications for the GM and self-care categories, compelling tools to help leaders develop their organizations and create winning strategies for this brave new world, and finally, unique, tangible output, including thoughts on a post-COVID shopping experience in store of the future. These will be presented by our friends at WD Partners, contemplating input from series participants, and will be made available following the virtual series. In other words, stay tuned. Now, I'm pleased to introduce an industry thought leader who has supported our Retail Tomorrow platform from the inception. Neil Stern is a senior partner at Macmillan Doolittle, a published author of 2 books, and a widely quoted expert on domestic and international retail innovation, serving retail clients worldwide. Recognized as a visionary around future retail concepts, he brings a relevant perspective to the post-COVID retail landscape. Without further delay, I'm happy to turn it over to you, Neil.
Great, thanks so much, Patrick. I'm really excited to be co-hosting the series on the Brave New Retail World. We actually gave a lot of thought to those words and what it meant to be thinking about the future. Brave because we need new thinking and we need to look at a very different lens. New because I don't think we have the luxury of following the old ways that we've been doing things. And world because we will be using this lens to look around the world and look not just in the US, but look everywhere for insight. And you'll be seeing some of that today. Each of the 4 sessions is designed to focus on a particularly critical aspect of the journey of the Brave New World. The first session, we're going to focus on the consumer and what the implications are for retail. And then in future sessions, we're going to do deeper dives. The next one into e-commerce, following that, global retail, and then finally, and maybe most critically, what does it mean to be a leader in this world, and what kind of leadership tools do we need for these challenging times? For today's session, I'm pleased to introduce my co-host, Derek Gaskins, who brings a wealth of experience in the world of grocery and convenience retail. Derek wears a lot of hats, including the Brave New Retail World hats for Retail Tomorrow. He's currently the CMO of Yesway, where he's the chief merchant, marketer, and brand steward for this fast-growing retail chain of convenience stores with over 420 locations stretching from Iowa to Texas. Derek will share a few of his perspective on how his world has changed, and then we'll get to the heart of the presentation as we start to look at the consumer and retail trends. Derek, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Neil. Yeah, certainly think that there has been a seismic shift, and this theme fits us so perfectly. It is a brave new retail world, and the way that I look at it is some people have talked about the new normal or things going back to how they used to be, and I often look at it more in terms of BC and AC. So before Corona, things that were normal or socially acceptable, let's say in the AC world after Corona, are no longer so. And it has impacted every aspect of how we go to market. And as a retailer, from our merchandising, category management to procurement, the supply chain impact, I would even say within marketing, the impact on the loyalty program, customer engagement, what matters to a consumer in this AC world has changed. And there is no pendulum that's going to swing back. It's how are we going to be flexible and more agile as we go forward to react and actually thrive in the face of those changes. So there's a couple more things that I wanted to highlight. And, for me and team, we had the foresight, and I would say that communication was more critical than it has ever been. Organizationally, top down from CEO, and I would also say bottom up, to have that voice and ear and be connected to the stores in the time of need has proven to be probably the most valuable thing that we've done. Second thing that I wanted to share is, as a marketer, we always thought of the world with the classic 4 Ps. And if I could get right on my product, my price, my promo, the place, I could master it and have gross profit growth or long-term loyalty and all of those positive things. I think it's now in a world of 6 Ps, and the other Ps would be process, and the most important P would be people. And our people have been essential heroes. I'm very fortunate and blessed that I can work from home and do Zoom. I have actually gone on the road, though, to be in the stores conscientiously and safely, wearing a mask and social distancing, because our stores never closed. And the communities that we serve, it was an essential role where our ALSUPs are located, and certainly our Yes Way stores. Many oftentimes it's a food desert, and we were able to meet the needs in a flexible, agile way. So going back to that BC and AC world, I'm sure that Scott is going to share some great consumer trends and insights of the shifting in consumption and behavioral patterns. But I just wanted to give a quick glimpse into how, from my seat, my team, and the people that make our organization thrive, we've been able to not only adapt to the change, but to embrace this brave new retail world and think that we all can thrive.
Great. Thank you so much, Derek. And yeah, I think we're all reminded just how essential retail is during this environment, and what retail is going to mean in the future. To help us with that, Scott's going to share work that he's been doing at Nielsen in terms of tracking the consumer, not just in the U.S. but around the world. And we're also going to put the audience to work. So we have an interactive poll that we're going to introduce to begin this session, and actually come back at the end and kind of share results and what we've learned. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and he'll introduce the poll and then take us through some fascinating insights about the consumer. Scott, it's all yours.
Terrific. Thanks, Neil. Really looking forward to digging into some of the detail with everyone. So you're going to see a poll appear. What we'd ask just over the next, and there it is, magically, have a look at these questions. We'll give you a minute or so to read them through. Answer as you think appropriate. And then what we hope we do a little bit later in the session is use your answers to help us have sort of conversations that will spin around some of these topics. So dive in there. I'm going to pull my presentation up while you're all doing that, and I'll come back to you in about a minute. Okay, 10 more seconds and we'll get moving along. Hopefully you're having a chance and the polls all working for you. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Now let's dive in. As both Derek and Neil sort of outlined, we are in that fundamental place of change. And we kind of know as well that the future's changing quite a bit faster than the past in many ways. So what we're going to try and do today is really quickly take you through a little bit of where we've been, a little bit of what we've learned through that very rapid journey through the first half of this year, and more importantly, what it'll mean moving forward as we look to months and really years ahead. Let's get some baselines in place first off. Now, my team is a global team. We've been working, unfortunately, on nothing else since January except COVID-19 and the implications that's had around consumer behaviors. And as we've looked around the world, first starting in China, as we saw COVID start to take hold, and then spinning through Europe, and then obviously through the rest of the world quite rapidly to get us to the point we're at today, there were three obvious ones, certainly not exhaustive, but three very consistent ones that we saw come through. The first is what we've all lived through and perhaps are still living through, which is this notion of the homebody economy, this return to cooking at home, to being at home more in every sort of do-it-yourself environment you can imagine. And that's obviously was one of those early leading indicators that we saw around sales spikes that were driven by people doing those stock ups that ultimately have continued to see a lift right across CPG in almost all categories, a lift above pre-COVID conditions. The second was this shift in gravity towards those top brands, those bigger brands that people knew and loved, had grown up with perhaps over the years, quite often category leaders that saw a real lift in sales as people ran towards them in the early days of stock ups and continued to move towards them even when those out of stocks and fulfillment challenges were solved. And then the third, and again, we're probably all living it, was that enormous shift, that overnight shift to the online channel in ways that, by every best forecast, would have taken years, that played out just in a matter of weeks. So those were a few of the things we saw. As I said, there was a lot of consistency in behavior. Now, what I mean by that is typically when Nielsen looks at our data around the world, or we try to make comparisons around the world, country to country, there's normally some daylight between those behaviors. Consumers behave differently fundamentally for cultural reasons, geographic reasons, etc. They didn't do that this time. We all behaved as humans. We all responded across those 6 horizons that you see at the bottom there. And we identified them very early on in the year as we saw repeat behaviors. China was the only real exception because it jumped those first few steps. It really leapt right into a restricted living environment, whereas the rest of us had a little bit of early warning and we did that pantry prep. We did that reactive health management, stocking up on vitamins or other healthcare sort of needs. So what we saw through that was this predictive behavior. And as time went on, and as retail began to open up again in some countries, we saw it perpetuate itself, this continued consistent behavior. So we started to put some inputs in to help us look further into the future, into those short, medium-term horizons. And as you can see, that's Q3, Q4 in the middle, and really in a longer term into the first half of next year. We loaded in some macro conditions, so looked at unemployment rates, inflation, inflation forecasts, interest rates, oil prices, all of these inputs coming from over 100 countries that we were looking at to determine how people would behave based on what we were starting to see and what we were modeling around things like demand of those consumers. And within that, there was sort of other, sort of players. There was that demand for efficacy and quality. Does the product do what it claims to do? particularly around healthcare, household cleaning, those kinds of things. And then a pivot towards a demand for more local, not just local products, but also a shift in many ways from a proximity point of view to stores that were closer to you, at least through those crisis sort of months. So with those inputs from a macro level, with Nielsen sales data and attitudinal data and household panel data in the middle of it, and then with health management, so an understanding of countries' response, so heavy quarantine, for example, track and trace systems, low quarantine, no quarantine, it really varied. And obviously in the US at a state level, just in the way it's being managed, you're seeing different calibrations again of that healthcare. So those were the inputs that then gave us these sort of three scenarios. And the rebound one is the easiest one, and there's very few countries, frankly, that are in that. China would be an example, New Zealand would be another example, Australia, though it's hitting pockets again of problems in the last few days. Reinvent are those countries that are really pushing the way into next year before they see any sign of regeneration around behavior. That's a Mexico, that's a Brazil, it's a Russia, deep in the midst of COVID. But through all of that, I talked about consistent behavior. There was some characteristics that rang through. Now, in the top right there, there's that sort of demand for authenticity, that demand that we, whether we're a brand or whether we're a retailer, are being able to prove that products are doing what they say they're doing. So lots of shift towards brand claims, understanding ingredients, understanding supply chains, understanding store environments, and the understanding that in those store environments, there was a lot of dependencies that consumers had no control over. So that was a trust play. But if you look against the 3 time scenarios, so remember, rebound is Q3, reboot Q4, and then reinvent into next year. US is probably somewhere in that middle zone right now, depending on what state you're in. If you're in a Florida, that might look a little bit different to a Connecticut, for example. But there's shift all the way through, and again, globally, certainly in the US, but happened everywhere else on the planet, a shift towards essentials in ways we've not seen before. In the easy countries or the easy states, it's just a depreciation. You're stocking up in a just-in-case way. But over time, and as fiscal constraints start to get in the way, that economy that's starting to groan under the belt of unemployment that's whipping it right now, and I'll come to that in a moment, you've got this sort of move towards absolute survival on the basics. And you start to see things like social backlash playing out in some communities. So that all being true, it then brings you to those change dynamics that come with it. And you're seeing 6 of them here, but it's really more than 6. But if we focus on what matters to us right now as we understand them, the 2 biggest ones are probably that recalibration of wallet and that recalibration of basket. There are some categories that will be abandoned over the coming months and years. There are some decisions that people are making around their basket as to whether they can stick with the brands they know and love, so that trust characteristic I outlined earlier, or whether they're going to have to downtrade. Are they looking at a value for money? Under what circumstances does value for money not matter? Price insensitivity is still going to be a thing in ways that it wasn't in the last recessionary environment we saw that was of any size, which was 08 and 09. What we are seeing is 2 types of spenders emerging. And we're seeing it play out over those 3 time horizons I described. And we're also seeing it play out even longer, frankly, across years. So insulated spender, in the early days of this, that could be people like me. I've got a job, I've got healthcare, I'm probably spending less than I normally do because I'm trapped in my house for months at a time, I'm not taking an expensive summer vacation, etc. Constrained, more likely to be those lower income earners and those out of, or those pushed out of work early in the cycle. But that's changing. And what we're seeing is people identifying themselves in the survey work and the studies that we're doing of consumers. We're learning quite quickly that even high income earners are identifying, often in the majority, 100,000 or more kinds of incomes that they're constrained. They're feeling constrained if they're not physically constrained. So important to understand that dynamic as we shift through time, because it impacts basket fundamentally. And if we split that insulated and constrained view in this way, and this will depend on where you are. It could be depend on where you are country level or at state level, even in the US in terms of availability or health concerns around you. The arrows you see here, by the way, are the 3 time horizons that I just outlined. And you can see how things get worse over time for those who are through those prolonged periods of endurance with COVID-19. The one, sort of resounding characteristic that remains true is a shift to health. An example of that, we've looked at food categories, for example, and food categories through COVID that have health claims or immune boosting claims are running at about 19-20% higher than pre-COVID circumstances. So health will remain important, we believe, through the cycle of basket adjustments playing out. But income will change too, and the way we spend will change for folks. Here's a view into what a wallet breakdown begins to look like. I'm using this because I find it helpful as we're recalibrating the view of consumer behavior. Where are they placing their bets or not placing their bets? And obviously, things like travel and vacation are off the table for many people very quickly, sometimes because it's just not possible or they don't feel comfortable traveling. But more importantly, it's more likely, particularly for those constrained spenders, that they'll simply pull back completely because they're forced to. All of that said, you then start to think about how we change in behavior. Now, what you're looking at here is some data that I pulled out of Australia, which is an interesting proxy for the US right now. It's an interesting proxy because it's further ahead in the cycle than the US is in terms of addressing infection rates, death rates, etc. And what you see is a real shift towards that home body experience that I outlined earlier. So even though, and we took this test in May when Australia was in a really good place in terms of crushing the infection out, people were sticking with that behavior of eating at home, that home delivery thing, and meal kits taking a nice lift, a category that didn't, necessarily respond as well in normal times, and perhaps may have even been in decline there in some other markets, including the US. So if that's true, what does it look like over time in terms of how we behave? Now, what you're seeing here, again, I'm using this Australia proxy, but I'll tell you this rough trend line is playing out even in markets that are further behind. We're seeing similar trend lines in the US right now, though a little spiky state to state, as you might expect, given what's going on. But really the takeaway here is this growth in CPG is continuing beyond the spikes. In the early days, those spikes were driven, I should say, by the news cycle. No longer are people being driven by the news cycle. We're not seeing that spikiness of a CDC press conference or a Trump press conference as a response to purchase. Now people have done that sort of just in case sort of purchase. So lots of reprioritization. I'm going to point out the health thing again because I think it's super important. So you've got a third of American consumers expecting that they're going to have change in their purchase behavior in a way that skews towards health products or products that can assist your healthy life or lifestyle and your family. So here's a view of what that feels and looks like through a food lens. So this is some work that the Nielsen-Basie's team did, and we're looking at March versus May here in terms of when consumers would pay more for a product that gives certain benefits. And these are the top 5 claims. So as you can see, back in March, they were looking for a majority of, 39%, the biggest number there, it's made by a company that I trust. But you can see how that shifts through May. As the country went through that peak cycle of COVID infection and death rates, you're seeing that they wanted something that was nutritious, something that helped their immune system stay strong, something that had healthy supplement characteristics. So big shift to health not necessarily based on price. So really important to think about as we think about assortment, as we think about range, as we think about promo, and also just placement, frankly, in the store, as we've seen perimeter of the store eroded in so many ways. I'm going to move quickly to online. So here's the shift that we've all lived through. This was what the US looked like, 7% last year. We picked up 4% overnight. So what I'll tell you is that's years ahead of where we thought we'd be right now had we not had the introduction of COVID. And here's what it looks like as you think about the new customers to online. So big entrance of the older demographic and a younger demographic. And interestingly, we're seeing, as you can see on the slide there, new buyers are repeating really strong retention rates of around a third. And interesting that you've got that sort of particularly 55 to 64-year-old group sticking around. If I took this data back a month, it looks exactly the same for that age group. It's still 15 versus 17% a month ago. So they're really, really sticking, or a month earlier, they're really sticking around. So let's jump into the future a bit. I've told you what happened in the past. I'm going to move to these future consequences quite quickly. And unfortunately, it looks like this. Your extraordinary recessionary shocks. There's a fair bit, I think, of denial out there right now in terms of just how long-term the impact of these sorts of shocks will be on consumer behavior, their ability to spend, their ability to retain brand relationships, their ability to retain, frankly, store format relationships. And it plays out in different ways depending on where you are, but it's important to frame it, I think, in this way, because it leads ultimately to what's fundamentally going to be, and already is, the biggest jobless problem that the country and the world has faced right now. You're seeing this shift that's somewhat masked right now by furlough schemes that will end at the end of July in the US, or many of the support functions around it will at least end then. So that masked unemployment and that slow return in some levels of retail, in the hospitality industry, for example, that have helped numbers shift a little bit off those big highs that we saw in April in the US, will start to come down again as things start to fall apart. Now, some context on that, you're looking at a global view here of what happened the last time we had something of any note in terms of a worldwide recession. A bit of context through a US lens I can give you. In 2009, the jobless level in the US peaked out at about 10%. It took about 5 years to get back to pre-recessionary levels. Back then in 2009, you had 6.6 million people unemployed in the US. Today, we're at about, depending on which numbers you use, anywhere between 20 and 30 million unemployed on benefits. So we're anywhere 4 to 5 times the number of people who are unemployed. So this is different. This one's different. And remember, this time, there's the psychological impact on purchase, the concern overriding with health, overriding the economic circumstances, which we saw last time, at a time when interest rates were different and the world wasn't facing a global pandemic. Worse still, you've got this youth burden. So 16 to 24-year-olds, you're looking at, in the US, somewhere between 20 and 30% over the last few months as it's fluctuated. What that means is you've got kids graduated high school who won't go into university or unable to afford to go to university with their families, or unable to get a job to pay while they're working, while they're at university. Student debt, if they do take it on, will extend for much longer periods of time. But importantly, this multi-generational household will start to spin off in ways we haven't seen before. Not an uncommon thing in the US. You've got about 1/5, based on at least the last census numbers, realistically 5 or 6 years old, but about 20%. We expect that to get much, much bigger as kids stay at home longer, delay marriage, delay kids, their parents delay retirement, their parents come to live with them as they avoid your elderly care environments that may have health risk around them with COVID. big changes to the way people spend in household and how the influences are there. And what that then tracks you to is back to this polarized habits, this constrained and insulated that impact at least the things that you're seeing on the screen there around this sort of what your portfolio starts to look like if you're a brand, a manufacturer, what your SKUs look like as you're looking at range in store, and then thinking about how important loyalty may or may not be in a constrained spending environment, for example. Now, just the last bit of context is confidence. And true confidence won't and can't come back until we have a vaccine or really some treatments that return confidence. We've been tracking confidence around the world since 2005, every quarter. And what you see here is the biggest single drop that we've ever seen in a quarter. As you can see, in the last recession, in the Great Recession, it took over a year to sort of work its way down. We just fell off a cliff earlier this year in Q2. Here's a little breakout of what that looks like comparatively. Obviously, job prospects are front and center, and personal finances are of huge concern to people in this climate. As we look around the world, North America certainly feeling worse off, as you can see there, but trending basically to the way everyone else is. If you break it this way, you can see that still personal finances are running through levels of concern along with job prospects and whether it's a good or bad time to buy things. I wanted to just bring you back to health one more time because I think it is that important. This would not normally be indexing the way it is, as you can see, Q4 last year versus Q2 of this year. Just a big, big leap towards where people have concerns. And then there's a last breakdown, really, of how we think about how long this recession will last. I think there's a lot of optimism here, frankly, in some of the respondents' answers. So I'll pull it up there. I think there's a whole bunch of things we're going to be able to get into through the rest of this. But these are 4 ways that at least I'm thinking about it as we absorb consumer behavior and really model it out and analyze it out over time. So as I say, we'll stop there and continue on to the next piece of the program.
Great, Scott. Thank you so much. As listening to the presentation, and I had the privilege, obviously, to get a preview of it. You realize just how complicated a world it is, right? Between constrained spenders or insulated spenders, between countries, between states that we have to deal with. It kind of creates this challenge for us of the brave new retail world, what it's going to look like. And unfortunately, I have to follow you and make sense of this, which I'll try to do in a very quick way, mostly to tease it. And I pulled this quote from the head of the National Retail Federation, because if you just listen to what Scott said, his next line is kind of prophetic here. He says, with such sizable disruptions, it's almost impossible to tally the damage and determine the future, right? Yet determine the future is precisely what our job is at this session, and then the ones that are coming up. It's just, how do you make sense of the consumer, where the consumer is going, and where retail is going? And the provocative questions is, does COVID usher in a new age of contactless experiences? This is a concept in Chicago called Wow Wow, that's a completely automated restaurant. And I've been showing this slide at various presentations for years, and usually about half the audience just 2 years ago would be appalled, and they say, where's the people, where's humanity, where's the food, right? It's a restaurant. But does this become the new normal? I like the fact that there's no interaction coming as part of it. Will we really see a shift in culturally accepted norms and practices? And I think the data on health and how we're going to be spending on health, I think, suggests that yes, things will really change. Or do we go back to the way things were? And again, I would have put this slide up a year or 2 ago and say this is a celebration of food, of eating, of socialization, of people getting together in groups. I think now most people look at this slide and say, ugh, you know, this is a COVID festival waiting to happen, right? So, you know, what's going to happen in the future? We've been talking in looking at the retail world in kind of the three extremes: value, convenience, and experience. And with the thought that COVID's only going to accelerate these trends, but you know, a giant question mark around the area of what does it mean to have an experience in the future. You know, when you look at the first trend on extreme value, I think as Scott lays out, this is only going to accelerate. The elements of value, obviously price, private label to generate traffic and differentiation. But in the middle here is this notion of treasure hunt, right? Which is value doesn't have to be boring. Value can actually be quite interesting, right? And Costco is a great example of delivering on all three of those elements. Obviously, it has price, but it has this experience as part of it. I came in for 5 items and I walked out with 20 and spent hundreds of dollars. Aldi has done an amazing job of reinventing their brand, not just in the U.S. but around the world. And you know, if you go to an Aldi today, here you are seeing organic products, or you are seeing gluten-free products. That little sign there about Aldi Finds, limited time only products that they're putting in. So with just 1,200 items or so, they're still able to create this sense of adventure as you go into the store. As we look at extreme convenience, this is really about removing friction from the shopping process. And you know, we were talking about frictionless retailing, and now contactless has become the new have. But you know, where is technology going to come into play to streamline the process? Where do all the elements of e-commerce come in through subscription services, delivery, pickup? Are really going to change the boundaries of convenience. Scott had wonderful numbers on e-commerce. I won't go through the same, other than to talk about the need that if we are going to see such huge increases in demand for e-commerce, we're going to have to figure out more efficient ways for retailers, brands to get products to the consumer. And this slide teases, if you will, an upcoming session we're going to have on e-commerce where we'll really dive deeply into this. And you know, if you look around here, that's a micro fulfillment center using robotics inside a Safeway store. Takeoff Technologies is one of the leaders in that area. Amazon Woodland Hills was the wonderful head fake on the part of Amazon. This was going to be the new Amazon grocery store of the future. And in fact, it opened for about a week and then they closed it, and it's a dark store now, fulfilling e-commerce demand. So we'll dive into that subject in more detail. And of course, the retailers that were most prepared before COVID are best positioned to take into account buy online, pick up in store. Walmart's put tremendous amounts of money and assets into making that process more efficient in the world of click and collect. And we take this further into the world of contactless technology. And again, you know, you kind of go inside an Amazon Go store, and is this the wave of the future? The product is packaged, the product's sanitized, you're not interacting with as many people. So what is extreme convenience going to look like? We're going to do a virtual study tour today shortly, and we'll dive into some case studies. And this is one of the ones that we'll use on Farmer's Fridge. And we're also going to look at Starbucks Roastery and this notion of extreme experience. As I said, this is the one that's probably going to undergo the most change. And this is almost like, I would say, the existential issue that brands and retailers have, right? Which is, when I was thinking about experience before, I wanted people to come to my store. I wanted them to stick around. I would build temples and monuments to the brand, which we'll see in Starbucks Roastery. Have customers involved in creation and co-creation of products and be able to personalize. And that's those little bins in the candy store probably aren't going to work anymore for bulk products. And Scott touched on it, but the notion of, we talked about value and pricing, but also values in how am I going to think about and interact with the brands that I have. And if you looked at his data, that came up as, you know, the brands I trust, the retailers I trust are are going to be people I'm going to do business with in the future. As I said, we'll tease the Starbucks roastery. This is a fabulous palace to coffee in Milan, Italy. What is that going to look like in an experience anymore? And Danny Wegmans, which Wegmans is probably our best supermarket chain in the U.S., kind of had this quote that says, a huge part of our business has been treating customers as guests and entertaining them. We can't do that the same way anymore. And he says, we lost our mojo, right? So when you think about this notion of experience, right, this was the way they used to do it: salad bars and soup bars and hot food counters and bulk food. And now you look around a Wegmans store and it's not the same experience anymore. So I think part of our job is to rethink what experience will look like in the future. So I'll end it there, and hopefully a little bit of the theme of what we're going to be doing in the brave new retail world, which is it's not the strongest, it's not the biggest, it's really the companies who can change with the most facility and the fastest are going to be the ones that win in the future, right? And hopefully what we'll be able to do is bring you glimpses of that future as we go through these next sessions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Derek for a second.
Yeah, now I think, Neil, first and foremost, great job. Scott as well. So wanted to build on both of your insights there, and really like the Darwin quote and focusing on how do we pivot and being nimble and fast and flexible, and not only adapting to a change, but seeing it as it's happening and navigating through that. I think that's one of the things that retail tomorrow has frankly always been about. I mean, when I got involved with it, I was still at Rutgers then, and it was a great opportunity to immerse myself on a one part, let's call it a store retail safari, where we are seeing in the wild or in the live innovative retail concepts as they happen. Then there's another part where subject matter experts are coming in and shaping the future. And some of these things were from academic research, or it may be from entrepreneurs and startups. But I know as a retailer, what I loved about it was it may not have been relevant to my core grocery business or my convenience business, but it certainly was to where the consumer was going. And I think in this brave new retail world, retail tomorrow has always been that glimpse forward. And while we do miss having the live curated experiences, this year we were to be in Chicago and Atlanta. Last year, Boston was one of the best ones. I've done the ones in Los Angeles and New York. And I mean, each one is very localized to the industry of that region, the academic institutions, and the business climate. But I do think that in this brave new retail world, what better way for us to show an ability to adapt to change and use virtual and video and vignettes to still be able to see what's happening on the front lines as we're leading change and pushing towards it. So I know we have a number of videos teed up. I think Amanda's going to get those rolling for us. So would I love to start with the first one?
Hi, my name is Mark McKelsey, and I lead the people and the projects at GMDC Retail Tomorrow that bring our members insights and consumer trends that guide companies through opportunities for both growth now and in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll be walking you through some key insights that I've been taking and tracking inside stores over the past few months, along with many of our partners, including Nielsen, during the pandemic and even through as we approach a second wave. I'll also discuss the implications what it means for you, your stores, and in the world of non-food brands. I'm calling these segments Keeping It Real. So let me just go ahead and pull up my presentation here. So I'll start by saying that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that there's a fundamental recalibration of retail taking place that is being driven purely by what's happening in the minds of shoppers during all phases of the pandemic here in North America. A humorous example of what's happening is with online shirt sales, which are skyrocketing Well, pant sales continue to decline as people realize that what they wear on Zoom only matters really above the table. This new reality is truly a signal of how consumers are torn between two different worlds. So take, for instance, Google announced last week that their entire workforce will be permitted to work from home, not only for the remainder of 2020, but most likely well into 2021 as well. Shoppers' values have completely changed as a result of the pandemic and forced the retail industry and its brands to put the consumer at the core of its strategy more than ever before. So let's start by saying that the new homebody economy continues to be gaslighting store sales. Nielsen, a strategic partner of GMDC, has labeled the new normal as the homebody economy for many obvious reasons. The implications of states reopening and taking effect for business, and most recently starting to shut down again and going from groups of 10 to 50 to 175, and even here in Colorado, we're down to a threat of even going back down to 50 again. It is obvious that people are becoming more aware of which companies have survived and which ones continue to be paralyzed. So if you thought tailgating was a thing over the past few decades, you should start thinking about home gating, and that ties nicely into what we've labeled as the homebody economy along with Nielsen. During the 8-week shutdown, what retailers deemed as essential have realized a $38 billion increased sales compared to the same time frame last year in 2019. 70% of that is incremental growth due to the coronavirus-focused shoppers, and 30% of those were loaded into pantries of homes across North America alone. Many of these trends continue to happen today, and we start to see the fluctuation spike up and down to some degrees almost as much as we see in March. The grocery industry lately has been reminiscent of what I call the early 1990s, where shoppers enjoyed a novel idea that the supermarket could provide them with everything they needed long before the rise of the specialty store phenomenon. And with malls in trouble as well, consumers are really focused and fine-tune their shopping trips so that they can stay at home, just go to work, and keep their life basically much more basic than what it has before. The trend of going back to your favorite grocery store for everything is indeed sustainable long after this original shock and the second shock of the virus is over. A 13% plus gain is predicted to last until the end of the year in grocery stores, along with a steady increase of $2.2 billion in consumption. But consumers also like to blend their trip between in-store and curbside, as grocery stores have seen a 94% increase in essential food and non-food ordering with BOPUS technology. Other categories, such as frozen foods, are forecasted to remain at 21% through the end of the year, which is an increase for in-store purchases throughout 2020, while every weekend until Christmas is expected to feel like Memorial Day weekend when it comes to beer and wine sales. Brick and mortar continues to welcome new and loyal shoppers to the store, and the consumer spending pie continues to grow across all areas. At one point in time, and not many years ago, the demise of the center store was even being discussed inside our association as the non-food industry continued to really slow, and many really questioned whether it would become irrelevant in 20, 30, 40 years due to the Amazon factor. Well, today, center store enjoys a 70% growth factor compared to last year because shoppers have an in-the-moment attitude towards shopping, and physical product adjacency is more popular than ever. And as you can see from the stats on the slide, center store is outpacing growth even in the perimeter, according to Nielsen's in-store data. At the same time, online is still king for top-up occasions, which are categories seen as fulfilling shoppers' indulgence, which are all up 67% versus last year. So that brings us to what brands matter most in a post-COVID world. Due to pricing and cost-saving concerns, private label really is coming out of this crisis as a clear winner. Private label non-food brands have seen a 44% increase that looks to be a solid trend tied to economic factors. Brands are up 27%, but that performance is focused on the brands that have a halo effect and were in stock when consumers were drawn back to the stores to buy essentials, many of whom you see here on this slide and are also members of GMDC. It's as if people are saying, hey, thanks. to those manufacturers who delivered on the promise to keep people safe and were quote unquote there for us. In fact, 80% of all consumers claim they have shifted from buying smaller and lesser known brands and now rely on what they consider as staple brands across all categories. And not just cleaning products. People generally are looking for comfort and familiarity during uncertain times. In fact, the psychological state of consumers across North America is very similar and does not seem to vary between coasts, as we've seen across many regions. We see more and more sameness in people's mindset across state by state. To me, that says that the raw human instinct has taken over because the mindset is purely about safety and health. Globally, shopping habits also share a few differences across the board as well. So that brings us to self-care. We all know that self-care is no longer a trend, but it's a new essential. We've been saying that for years at GMDC Retail Tomorrow. In fact, we hosted our first self-care summit event last year, and we'll be doing it again this fall. But it's not just a mindset anymore, it's permeating through all the lifestyle that consumers want and desire to have. With the rise of telehealth presuming to show itself as a major part of consumers' lives long after the pandemic is over, grocery stores especially and many other outlets continue to be seen as an epicenter of proactive health solutions outside of hospitals and the walls of the doctor's office. One of GMDC's partners and experts in the consumer healthcare space, Jane Saracen-Kahn, says, and I quote, "In the eyes of consumers, and especially post-COVID-19 consumers, healthcare is found virtually everywhere, at the grocery store, faith-based institutions, the pharmacy, the school, the barbershop, the beauty salon, the spa, in medical cannabis storefronts, in parks, in gardens, through e-commerce sites, and especially at home," which ties in nicely with our homebody economy that we've been talking about. Many retailers who enabled and altered their operations by introducing dedicated shopping hours for at-risk groups, such as the elderly or healthcare workers who are on the front lines, have quickly been known as what we call the self-care saviors of their communities during the pandemic. And that has a much longer lasting effect long after the pandemic is over. Couple that with swiftly rolled out safety measures inside the stores, along with extended services and new consultation platforms for health at home measures, many retailers really have built deep-rooted trust with local communities that will survive for many years to come. Weiss Markets and Ahold and Delhaize both have set up new healthy living sections and meet our dietitian areas on their websites, which are great examples of what they're doing to really serve the local community.
Hi everyone, this is Amanda Lai with Retail Tomorrow. Today we're in downtown Chicago with Farmer's Fridge. Under normal circumstances, I would grab a lunch here maybe once or twice a week, but as you can see, the vending machines are still closed as the city of Chicago quietly reopens amid coronavirus. Let's learn a little bit more about the Farmer's Fridge story. Meet Farmer's Fridge. Founded in Chicago in 2013, Farmer's Fridge has built a fleet of over 400 smart fridges, offering fresh, healthy meals and snacks on the go. The fridge vending machines are stocked daily 5 to 7 times a week, with chef-curated salads, sandwiches, bowls, and snacks, and items are affordably priced between $5 to $8 each. The handmade meals and snacks are made from scratch daily, using local partners and seasonal ingredients whenever possible. Restaurant quality food gets delivered by refrigerated vans in the early morning so that by the time you show up, there's fresh food waiting for you. Farmer's Fridge set out to remove the roadblocks to eating fresh, wholesome food for travelers looking for healthier alternatives to fast food. You can find fridges in airports, transit stations, office buildings, and hospitals throughout the Midwest and Northeast United States. In the age of coronavirus, Americans were no longer traveling or commuting to work, so Farmer's Fridge temporarily closed their fridges and quickly pivoted to catering and home delivery as demand shifted. Customers can now get the same fresh, delicious meals delivered to their doorstep to enjoy from the safety and comfort of their own homes. Farmer's Fridge was already an innovator in its field. bringing consumers fresh, convenient meal solutions in high-trafficked areas using smart vending technology. In recent months, as demand in traditional channels slowed dramatically, Farmers Fridge quickly shifted to catering to hospital healthcare workers and offering home delivery as it continues to meet the needs of consumers wherever they may be.
Farmers Fridge is an amazing example of double innovation at retail. First, they invent the idea of a vending machine for fresh salads, and then they're able to quickly pivot to home delivery during the middle of the pandemic. Another Chicago entrepreneurial company that's looking to reinvent the in-store digital experience is Cooler Screen. The story is here.
Hi guys, this is Amanda Lai again with Retail Tomorrow. We're at the two-story Walgreens flagship in downtown Chicago to hear more about the Chicago-based company Cooler Screens and their innovative technology. The digital smart screens with built-in motion sensors allow retailers to dynamically market to customers directly at the point of purchase and allow customers to look up nutritional information, ingredients, product reviews, and promotions with a single tap. Cooler Screens co-founder and CEO Arsen Navakian joins us today virtually.
In our ideal world, Retail Tomorrow would have been in the State Street flagship of Walgreens with you, showing the screens. We'll try to do that by video, but what's the vision behind it, and what do you hope to accomplish as you sort of build out this network?
The vision is very simple, Neil. I think we will all agree that the consumers have evolved in their expectations of what the shopping means, because over the last 20 years, Amazon's and others in the e-commerce world, online world, they have trained the consumers to certain expectations. But when they walk into a regular traditional brick and mortar stores, right, there is a huge disconnect between what they're now considered to be normal, to be able to get a basic information and the transparency or relevancy, whether it's the comparisons or reviews or the ingredients and the calories, right? They walk into a brick and mortar and it feels like they're back into the past, right? 1950s. Right. So the vision is to bring to the brick and mortar retail the best of what consumers love about shopping online into the environment within a seamlessly integrated environment within the retail. So now physical retail and the digital retail become very harmoniously integrated together to create the best of both worlds for the consumers. That's the vision.
Awesome. So I know you've got big plans and partnerships with Walgreens. What else can you talk about in terms of, if we go out a couple of years, where else might we see the screens, and what's your plans for this?
Walgreens is the big national rollout that's underway. We've publicly announced that. We have great pilots underway with the largest grocery in the country out of Cincinnati. You can read into that. We have a great C-store chain partner in Pittsburgh, GetGo, owned by Giant Eagle. We're very close to announcing 2 other convenience store chains. And we have publicly spoke about, we have partnerships with Target in pilots, as well as with Loblaws in Canada, both in their Loblaws banners as well as their Shopper Drug Mart. So there are a lot of seeds planted with different retailers across the country, different formats. So we're learning together with them. But the national big expansion that will take us to 2,500 stores next year, reaching nearly 80 million consumers on a monthly basis. So it's massive. That's Walgreens. Where my vision hopefully will lead the companies to become not only now the first digital merchandising and a digital media platform for in-store, but we hope to be the world's largest in-store digital media platform in the brick and mortar retail.
I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot, but I'll ask it. What's been the impact of COVID? Has it changed your plans, changed your thinking? Just so, as an entrepreneur, what has it meant for you?
Well, I always answer that question being very careful, because I don't want to be not empathetic to the problem that the pandemic represents to everybody, right? So, but we happen to be perhaps one of those few businesses that are in the pocket that's benefiting from this situation, in a sense, for 2 simple reasons. One, brick and mortar retail, frankly, has proven again that they are here to stay. They are the ones who feed America. and there is a lot of traffic going through those stores, either for those essentials, food supplies, or their drugs, pharmacy needs, right? So with that said, Walgreens has experienced, like many other retailers, a big spike in traffic, which we've become a beneficiary of, because the brands who would advertise normally in many other channels out of store, their logic was very simple. Not only for all the reasons we spoke about, it makes sense to connect with the consumers at that last mile inside the store, but it's also where the eyeballs were.
Hopefully next time around we'll do this live and in person, but I want to thank you so much for your time today.
No, thanks for organizing this series, so thank you.
We've asked the provocative question, what is experience going to look like at retail stores in the future? Kevin Koop takes us into Stu Leonard's, which is really one of the pioneers of delivering experience in the food retail industry, and how they're responding to the pandemic.
From the earliest days of the pandemic, the store in my market that has been absolutely killing it, and I think for good reason, is Stu Leonard's. Now, if you're not familiar with Stu Leonard's, they've got 7 stores, okay, in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. I've been shopping at the original store in Norwalk, Connecticut for about 35 years. I once did the math and figured out for 35 years, 48 weeks a year, I've spent probably about at least $150 a week. I've spent a lot of money in that store. But the thing about Stu Leonard's is they didn't have to change their aisles to have a directed traffic flow during the pandemic, because they always had a directed traffic flow, sort of like a maze. The other remarkable thing about Stu Leonard's is they've only got 1,200 SKUs, more or less, okay? Largely fresh, a little bit of non-foods, some CPG, but limited assortment. In fact, most of the packaged product they have is private label. And it has been remarkable. One of the things that's been clear is that throughout the entire pandemic, and I was going there at least once a week, is they hardly had any out of stocks. I mean, they didn't always have toilet paper, but they never had a lot of toilet paper anyway. That wasn't their thing. And here's the other remarkable thing about Stu Leonard's. Each of those 7 stores does $2 million plus a week in sales. 7 stores, $2 million a week in sales, and they're doing it with about 1,200 SKUs. It is a remarkable story. For a minute, I'm going to take you on a brief tour of Stu Leonard's, then we'll come back and talk about 1 or 2 things afterwards.
So welcome to Stu Leonard's. There's the famous lock. There's one of these in every store. Rule number 1, customer's always right. Rule number 2, if the customer's ever wrong, reread rule number 1. The bakery doesn't only just look great, it smells great. When my kids were little, I'd take them there. There was a woman named Dodie. She'd make sure they always got fresh bagels to nibble on, warm. Kids love Dodie. They love the bagels. That's one of the reasons we had to go every week. The focus is on fresh-made potato chips, grab-and-go salads. At Stu Leonard's, they still believe in the old tenet, pile it high, sell it cheap, and it really works. Not a lot of soft drinks. Almost all of it is Coke. The milk department, there's only 2 sizes, and it's all virtually private label. This is how they started, as a dairy store. The meat department is great. You walk through, you should see the line of people here on the holidays, lining up to have their filet mignon trimmed or custom cut. This is an enormous amount of business for Stu Leonard's. By the way, notice that they have a directed traffic flow. They didn't have to add aisle signs when the pandemic hit. They already had people going in one direction. Yes, there's toilet paper, paper towels, but more important, seafood, really well merchandised, really well marketed. It reeks of fresh. Same thing with the cheese department, and then the heart and soul, the produce department, which has been redone in recent years to look more like a farm stand, has an amazing amount of vitality. And then as you get towards the end, what happens is you get to the hot bars and the cold bars. And one of the things, they've maybe lost some of their dynamism simply because of the pandemic. They've had to adjust the way they merchandise them because of pandemic requirements, but that's okay. Still doing a lot of business. And then here we are, we're at the end. We picked a quiet day, so this is one of the rare times you'll see lines not at the checkouts.
So 2 things. First of all, real quickly, limited assortment. Boy, does that give them an advantage when it comes to supply chain, right? While everybody else is wrestling with these enormous supply chains, When you have 1,200 SKUs, it's not that complicated. And they had strong relationships that made sure that in virtually every category that they normally carry, they had product. Big advantage, great way to get people into the store. Second thing, think about the last few seconds of the video. And you're looking at these hot bars and these cold bars that used to be self-service, no longer are, because it's just not seen as being safe. And this points up at a major issue that's going to face a lot of retailers going forward. Do they try and go back to self-service? Do you do it with one-time use utensils for serving purposes? Do they go to robotics? Do they go to service, a service display somehow, try and figure out a way to have people behind the counter helping people with hot bar and cold bar kind of stuff? Or they just simply get out of that business and use it for prepackaged product? A lot of different retailers are going to be coming at it from different directions. It's going to be interesting because that is very valuable real estate, and it's real estate that used to be the place where a lot of retailers made their bones in terms of their differential advantage. That's gone away. Be interesting to watch the landscape as retailers try to navigate the world of retail tomorrow.
Imagine spending tens of millions of dollars on an incredible store flagship experience, which is exactly what Starbucks Roastery did in Chicago, only to have the world change and store traffic be limited. We go inside the Roastery about 1 year after it's open to see how it's responding to the new world.
Welcome to Starbucks Roastery in Chicago. The 35,000 square foot building features 5 floors, each with its own unique Starbucks experiences. The centerpiece is the cask, a 56-foot tall, Willy Wonka-like structure that delivers coffee beans to each floor through overhead piping to individual coffee dispensers. A Starbucks reserved coffee bar is on the first floor. Their Italian Princi Bakery is on the second floor. The third floor features an experiential coffee bar with master baristas. The fourth floor houses a cocktail bar and barrel-aged coffee bar. And then the fifth floor rooftop overlooks the Magnificent Mile. Here we have some footage from local Chicago influencer Vic Lee. In the months after the grand opening, fans traveled from around the world to visit the Roastery in Chicago. Lines wrapped around the city block and customers waited for hours to try out the world's largest Starbucks. Once inside, lines reached around each floor and baristas squeezed around one another to serve delicious food and drinks to the influx of customers. Now let's fast forward and see what the Roastery is doing during COVID.
Hi everyone, this is Amanda Lai with Retail Tomorrow. Right now we're at the Starbucks Roastery in Chicago, the largest Starbucks in the world.
During the pandemic, rope dividers have been set up to guide traffic flow, and the experiential coffee bar has been closed due to its interactive nature. Instead of handling individual paper menus, they've printed large menu boards. Counter seating has been removed, plexiglass has been installed, and there are far fewer tables, with masks only allowed to be removed when seated. The upper floors have been converted into a reservation-only restaurant space, so we put in a reservation and were pleasantly surprised to be ushered over to a private elevator that brought us directly to the 4th floor for what felt like a more private and intimate dining experience at the Roastery. Even amidst the pandemic, retailers like the Starbucks Roastery have continued to find ways to create experiences in a safe but still engaging environment as they continue to innovate the retail of tomorrow.
Next up is our Future Facing 5, where we ask industry thought leaders, visionaries, and provocateurs to share their opinions on a few specific questions of interest to the Retail Tomorrow community. Our guest today is Chris Walton, co-CEO of OmniTalk and a well-known retail futurist and senior contributor to Forbes. Welcome, Chris. Hey, Chris, good afternoon. Welcome to the Retail Tomorrow, Brave New Retail World, Future Facing 5.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Where do we find you today?
I am at my home in Minneapolis.
Good time of year to be up there, and hopefully things start opening up soon so you're not fully sequestered and get out and enjoy summer in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, let's hope. Best place in the world, 8 months of the year. Can't say the same the other 4 months, but yes, exactly right.
I almost moved to Minneapolis once. I ended up in Nashville instead, and I love it up there, but winter's a little too much for me.
Yeah, they're not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. You got to be of hearty stock to make it through them.
So listen, we appreciate you joining us for Future Facing 5. As you and I had communicated over email, I've got 5 specific questions that are of interest to the Retail Tomorrow community. And we're going to essentially step through it in a lightning round. I'm curious to get your perspective. And are you ready for the triple F, as I'm calling it?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. All right, Chris, using your crystal ball, what will the U.S. retail landscape look like in about 5 years?
That's a great question. I think the number one thing to think about is retail's not going away. There's words of the phrase that's always thrown out, the retail apocalypse. That's not going to happen. The pie is still going to be the pie. The way I like to think about it is not retail apocalypse, but more a retail reckoning. And from my perspective, if you look 5 years out, I'd say there's two major changes on the horizon. I think number one, the department store industry and even much of the specialty apparel industry is going to look far, far different than it does today. If you look at department stores like Macy's, JCPenney's, quite frankly, it's hard to find a reason for their being anymore. And same with specialty apparel. Many of those products can still be found online. There's margin implications there. And what you're going to see is gradually over time, those retailers are going to get replaced by the digitally native startups who are able to speak to their customer from a different omni-channel perspective. I think the other big change you're going to see is, of course, in the grocery industry. COVID's accelerated this very quickly, but it's going to be a dogfight. You're going to see Walmart, Amazon duking it out with all the regional grocers and trying to add to their omni-channel capabilities in any which way that they can in order to make things viable for the long term economically. And you're already starting to see that happen, I think, over the first, say, 2 to 3 months here under COVID-19.
Awesome. Dogfight indeed. All right, number two. Which emerging services or technologies are best positioned to inspire consumers on their shopping journey?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I think you have to look at that foundationally too. So I think it depends on what layer you want to double click into that question. I think first and foremost, foundationally, and if you listen to the smart people that are leading companies like a Walmart or Amazon talk about this, fundamental is you've got to be cloud-based in terms of your point of sale system and be able to capture data in real time. Along those same lines, your order management system likely is going to need an upgrade to handle everything that's going to come your way. Now, what do you need to do with that once it's in place? Well, I think the biggest thing that you're going to see, especially as you talk about the bloodbath that could proceed in the grocery industry, I think you're going to see a big move towards hyperlocal fulfillment. How do you get more automated in your picking and packing? How do you get closer to the consumer from a last mile perspective and start to take advantage of the economics that come with that? You're seeing people start to pilot and experiment with that at a rapid pace. It's rumored to be in Amazon's new a key part of Amazon's new grocery stores in LA and possibly in Chicago. So look for that as well. The other thing I would advise retailers to do is what you're hearing from COVID is how do you get more contactless? But what does contactless mean? I always joke that's retail's new safe word, but nobody really knows when or how to use it. It's kind of awkward at times. But really, if you look in order, it's this. It's BOPIS. If you haven't done that already, you're a little late to the party, but if you haven't, you've got to fortify that, or you have to make it better. It's how you put things in like concierge shopping, which you're seeing at Sam's Club, where you just pull up, or even at Domino's, where you pull up, you can order whatever you want, and they'll bring it out to you. Next wave of that is really what I would call social and even text-based commerce. How are you interacting with your consumer on different platforms than have existed before, specifically by way of digital. And then last but not least, you get into the places of true checkout for your contactless retail, either by way of scan and go mobile applications like you see in Sam's Club Now or 7-Eleven, or the big kahuna like a computer vision based system like what you'd find in Amazon Go. Last place would be live stream e-commerce. I think that's about to take off. It's huge. Multi-billions of dollars overseas in China. But with us not able to go into stores, tapping into that psychology, that phenomenon is also something I think retailers should start to explore.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Different direction here. How do you see the retailer-supplier relationship changing over the next 5 years?
Pretty significantly here as well. I mean, I think the big bellwether event during COVID that just happened was Pepsi going direct. Pepsi launched snacks.com. I think you're going to see more brands, more CPGs figure out how to try to circumnavigate the traditional retail channel. If you start to look at everything that, say, Instagram's been doing, Facebook's been doing, even Shopify's been doing, in terms of creating new platforms for connections with consumers, it makes sense for the brands to say to themselves, wait, hold on a second. Why are we spending all this time, money, advertising dollars through the traditional channels? Why don't we own that relationship more closely through these new platforms that are emerging, i.e. through these platforms of social commerce that are emerging, and see what happens from there? And so I think you're going to start to see this kind of push and pull of what do the traditional supplier and traditional retailer relationships start to look like as a result of that. Because for the most part, e-commerce has been traditionally a, hunt and peck search business. But where discovery happens for all these brands has always been in the stores. But if you can't do that anymore, discovery can now happen through the social feeds, and how the brands take hold of that is a huge opportunity.
Excellent. You've been a leader in this industry for a long time. As you think about what's coming ahead, what leadership skills do you think will be required to enable success as the industry evolves?
I always point to one. It's learning agility. And learning agility to me, by definition, means having the ability to succeed in first order conditions. That's what people need to start screening for on resumes, quite frankly, because that is a key to innovation. You have to have shown the ability in your background to succeed when it hasn't been mapped out for you before. And if you think about it, it makes sense because technology is changing at such a rapid pace that if we knew how to do something that everyone else already knew how to do, chances are we're already a little bit behind. So you want to find those people in your organization that can lead your efforts on the innovation front specifically, that have succeeded in the past when the roadmap wasn't there for them previously.
You think about COVID, I mean, any playbook that existed went out the window. So to your point, anybody that's finding a way to succeed right now has had to demonstrate agility.
Exactly. And this is I always joke, this is the greatest experimentation hall pass in the history of retail. So find the people that are willing to do that and are being successful at doing it.
Fantastic. All right, fifth and final question on the Future Facing 5. If you could mash up two existing retailers or concepts to create the ideal future shopping experience, which two would they be and why?
Well, my background, I have a big background in home furnishings. I have always wanted to see Home Depot and Wayfair get together. Wayfair doesn't have stores. You put your hands together, you start to imagine what that could look like in all these strip malls where the real estate's going to start to become pretty cheap to get. And, when all this is over, basically they could own every home furnishings occasion. Like it's really there for the taking. And if they were able to do that, whoa, that spells some serious bad news for Target and Walmart, where home furnishings, quite frankly, are a big profit driver for those guys relative to what they're carrying in the essentials and groceries categories. So that's something I've always wanted to see. It hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of different ways they could try to pull that off, but God, it would be so fun to see that come about.
That is awesome. Chris Walton, thanks for your time. And always appreciate you coming in with us at Retail Tomorrow, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. We want to thank everybody for hanging with us. We had a lot of content, a lot of things we want to talk to you guys about in limited time. If we can we look at the results of the poll question that we had talked about earlier? All right, we have to scroll down a little bit here. It's pretty interesting. Improved collaboration between retailers and manufacturers at 23%. Much faster adoption of online grocery shopping at 29%. I think we hit a lot of these themes. We are going to, as we go through, ask a provocative question each time and hopefully be able to respond to that. We're inviting the panelists back, Derek, Scott, Patrick, of course. Love to have a really quick wrap on what you took out of today's session, if you can. Derek, I'll start with you.
Yeah, certainly. First and foremost, I think, for something virtual, that this was powerful. So there was a lot to take away. One of the key things that I've talked about is it's almost what was just shared from the poll. We have gone from things that used to be innovative and futuristic to now they are expectations. So I think whether we're retailers, manufacturers, there's an expectation for contactless, that technologies that were on a roadmap are now expectations to be real or to at least be tested. So I think the flexibility, the agility, and all those things are what really stuck with me. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thank you so much. Scott, hopefully we did Nielsen justice a few times during our talks today.
Very much. We always appreciate it. Look, I go to the poll question, actually, seeing that overwhelming response for a bigger focus in online. I want to shine a quick light on risk. We know retailers in many cases have actively avoided getting those online consumers because they're less profitable fundamentally in many ways than their brick and mortar consumers. This big shift to online means you've suddenly got a pile of less profitable consumers. There's a real risk that if you don't embrace them, happily, the way the poll results are reflecting, you'll go the way of the music industry and the newspaper industry, who actively pushed away digital habits of consumers. I think that's retail's opportunity right now, is to go after them and embrace them versus continue to try to resist them through a profitability lens. So big play there.
Great, and thank you so much for today. Patrick, I'll give you a brief couple of seconds, and then I'll tease our next segment and let everybody get on with their day today.
Perfect. Thank you, Neil. Hey, listen, I just want to say thanks to Neil and Amanda from McMillan Doolittle. Thank you, Derek, and also Scott from Nielsen. So appreciate your thought leadership and participation today. I know you guys have put in a heavy lift organizing and orchestrating this content. 3 things struck out, one from each of you in your presentations, your comments. Derek, the idea of 6 Ps, not 4 Ps, really resonated with me. As someone with a marketing background, we think in terms of the 4 Ps, but you're spot on. Layering in process and people at this point is going to be key for success moving forward. Scott, the 2 words that stuck with me from your comments and data, constrained and insulated. And the dichotomy between the 2, that's something we're all going to have to struggle with and I think manage in the near term. Also, this idea of rebound, reboot, reinvent. I can't wait to get to reinvent. I suspect we're still a ways away, but the sooner the better. And then Neil, the 1 word that really stuck out with me was extreme in your comments and content. Value, convenience, and experience. We're going to have to stay focused on that. So again, a great job by all of you, and just really fascinating insights and content. I thank all of you for your participation. And Neil, take us to the next session.
Yep, and I want to thank the participants and people who attended the webinar, and you guys teed us up perfectly for the next one on August 12th, which will be about e-commerce, which was the #1 answer that everybody gave for what do we have to accelerate. We're going to do a session just on that. We have some incredible guest speakers, co-hosts set up, and we're going to go deep into the world of e-commerce and what it means for the retail world. With that, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.